Not many understood Blade Runner when it was released. Critics called it cold, emotionless, and lacked empathy. Many said it needed a human touch. But maybe that was the point? "42 years later, we have had a chance to fully dissect this cult classic. How did it birth a new genre and inspire so many films after it? Well, let's chase this unicorn and see where it takes us." I'm Max, and this is Letters from the Editor. Let's start at the beginning. Blade Runner, directed by Ridley Scott, is based on the Philip K. Dick novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Unlike most movies based on books, this movie is far better than the book, at least in my opinion. But they are also vastly different in their approach to themes. You see, in the book, Deckard is not as hard-boiled and morally gray as he is in the movie. The Deckard of the novel is quite mild in his demeanor, actually, and floats through the story as a bystander, experiencing the events along with the reader. The novel also is not overly exciting. It is more of a thought experiment on the topic of androids and the meaning of a human soul. And this last part is something that the movie does take heavy inspiration from. Ridley Scott chose to take the best parts of Electric Sheep and wrap them in an action-packed, visually stunning film, while still asking the same questions that the book posed. Philip K. Dick was no fan of Hollywood. He liked movies, but he hated the process of filmmakers taking authors' literary works and reducing them to pure, cheap entertainment, as he says. He wanted movies to make you think. But even with his distaste for Hollywood, 2 of Dick's short novels had been optioned for films already, and would go on to be made into movies such as Total Recall and Screamers. Electric Sheep had been optioned a few times before, finally landing in the hands of a guy named Hampton Fancher. Fancher was new to writing sci-fi, but he was captured by the novel's themes. The original screenplay went through many rewrites, and all the while, Fancher and producers Michael Dealey and Brian Kelly searched for a director to steer the ship. Eventually, they landed on a man named Robert Mulligan. Mulligan had directed a little movie you might know called To Kill a Mockingbird. A great film, but not exactly the kind of movie kindred to Blade Runner, which at this point was titled Dangerous Days. Mulligan was an odd choice for a substantial risk like this, but he was excited about the project and decided to come on board as director. Unfortunately, Mulligan did not stay on very long, as there was tension between him and Fancher on plot decisions and themes. So, Mulligan eventually stepped down as director, bringing production to a halt once again. And this is the beginning of a long chain of misfortune that would plague Blade Runner until its eventual release and beyond. During the same time of Mulligan's departure, Universal was having second thoughts about the whole venture. The studio kept pushing for Fancher to write a happy ending to the story, fearing that moviegoers wouldn't connect with a doom and gloom ending. Everyone loves a happy ending, as they say. Fancher continually resisted this push, but as we will see later, money pulls the strings. Universal pulled out of the project soon after Mulligan left in 1979, and the team had to pivot to find a new studio. They landed with CBS Films, but this too was a dead end, the studio citing the film as too rich. The production was back to square one. No director, no studio, and no hope of getting this movie made. Fortunately, months earlier, Michael Dealey had sent the script to the man who would become the director of Blade Runner, Ridley Scott. Coming from the success of Alien, Scott was a hot commodity in Hollywood, with many scripts being thrown at him, one of which was an early adaptation of Dune, and this is one of the reasons Scott originally said no to the project. The team was crestfallen when Scott chose to pass on the script, as he was their top pick at the time. But soon, Scott had a death in his family during this time and chose to turn down Dune because it would have taken over his life. And it was not until 1980 that Scott began circling back on other projects. He asked Dealey for the most recent version of Dangerous Days, and Dealey gladly provided one. Scott ultimately took on the project, citing his need to take his mind off his grief, saying, "Accepting Dangerous Days helped me get through my brother's passing." Soon, the film also got a studio, Filmways. The studio gave the team around $3 million to start production, and with a full pledge of $13 million total. Finally, the film was getting made. Now all that needed to be done was rewrite the script so Scott could start shooting. And here we arrive at another roadblock. Hampton Fancher and Ridley Scott got along initially, bouncing ideas around with vigor. And Fancher loved the ideas. He started rewriting right away. But eventually, disagreements started. You see, Fancher wanted a more romanticized vision of the future, while Scott wanted a more hard-boiled detective thriller. This became something neither party would budge on. This eventually culminated in Fancher being let go from the project. Well, soon, a writer named David Peoples was brought in to finish the script. Peoples worked with Scott and made the changes needed to get the project moving. But just as things were picking up steam, yet another roadblock got in their way. Are you sensing the theme here? Filmways was having second thoughts and essentially backed out of funding the project. So the team scrambled to find a new studio to fund the film. They had already begun hiring VFX artists and production designers for the massive sets they had planned. Well, this is when executive producer Michael Dealey went to dozens of studios asking for support and ended up getting money from 3 different studios. This would cover their expenses and could finally get the project underway. More problems would plague production, but we will come back to that. For now, let's dive into some of the set work utilized in the film. Welcome to Ridleyville. With the help of legendary designer Sid Mead, Scott and company turned the New York Strip backlot at Warner Brothers into a grim, futuristic city. They used large piping and appliances to retrofit the exteriors of each building. This gave the set a feeling of layering, that as the years went by, they added new technology bit by bit, until the original structure could barely be seen. The lighting on the film was just as extensive as the buildings. The production had a 7-man team solely devoted to the neon lights on set. Scott wanted to try and use as much available light as possible to get the natural look of a lit-up city. And I think it paid off. And no city is complete without traffic. They used dozens of old cars with futuristic pieces attached to the outside. They littered them around the city. And these were in stark contrast to the flying spinners that the Blade Runners use. These spinners were filled with hydraulic flaps and panels. It used jet turbine props as its source of thrust, and the whole thing was suspended by a gigantic, dedicated crane that would hoist it into the air for scenes. The spinners are only shown briefly in a few scenes of the film, yet their place in pop culture is cemented. The design is so iconic and unique that they are instantly recognizable. The details even went down to the smell of the set. It was filled with aromas of burning coffee, wet trash, and boiling noodles. They constructed an entire working noodle bar, complete with cooking food and workers to man the station. People in the future can't just use a regular old payphone either. The vidphone used throughout the film was a prop, completely made from scratch. Nowadays, we obviously have this functionality at our fingertips. But in Scott Mead's predicted future, citizens used payphone-like video conferencing machines. And to integrate them into the world, the team spray-painted graffiti and dirt all over them, just as you would see on any street corner in New York. Ridleyville was filled to the brim with detail and was the main shooting location for most of the film. It was created in a way that they could use all the various side streets and angles to make each scene look different, while only being a short distance apart. Blade Runner is widely credited with defining the aesthetic and themes of the cyberpunk genre, setting a precedent for future narratives within the style. The blend of film noir elements with a futuristic setting introduced viewers to a world where the line between human and machine is blurred, reflecting cyberpunk's deep interest in identity, artificial intelligence, and the consequences of technological advancement. By weaving these elements together, Blade Runner not only influenced countless films and books within the genre, but also shaped the visual and thematic framework that would come to define cyberpunk in popular culture. All right, let's talk the gear. Blade Runner was filmed using Panavision Panaflex Gold cameras, which were known for their reliability and ease of use. Panavision C-series anamorphic lenses were utilized, allowing for the wide, distorted vistas that helped create the film's immersive futuristic world. These lenses are celebrated for their ability to produce unique lens flares and a sense of depth. Additionally, the film was shot on Eastman Kodak 5257 film stock, known for its fine grain and excellent color rendition, which was crucial for capturing the vivid, neon-lit scenes and the stark contrast of light and shadow that characterize the film's moody aesthetic. The combination of these technical elements played a pivotal role in bringing the film's dystopian visions to life, influencing the look and feel of future sci-fi films forever. The special effects in Blade Runner are undeniably breathtaking, but the team didn't need cutting-edge technology to pull them off. In fact, a lot of the effects were shot like a low-budget film. Other than a few tools that were advanced tech for the time, most of the film used clever filmmaking tricks that had been around for a long time. Computers were only just being utilized in film, and so the production did not have CGI to lean on due to budget and time. They shot all the effect shots with 70mm film. That way, when they printed the final effect onto 35mm, there would be minimal loss in quality. The production was also tight on time, planning a 1982 release. They only had about a year and a half to finish the movie. The team chose to try and achieve every effect shot in camera, using various methods to save on time and money. The special effects company was Entertainment Effects Group, or EEG, with a guy named Douglas Trumbull at its head. The company was fairly new, but had some solid credits to its name, including 2001: A Space Odyssey and Star Trek: The Motion Picture. The opening shot of the film depicts a massive industrial wasteland that the team coined Hades Landscape. This was a large, forced perspective miniature that measured 13 feet deep and 18 feet wide. It was rigged up on tables of various sizes and distances so that the perspective was correct for the camera. This miniature had thousands of small light sources all sparkling, and they used a technique called front projection to composite the burping flames from the smokestacks. They got this effect by using a motion control camera system nicknamed the Icebox. This was a rack-mounted computer system that used a programmable tape that recorded all the movements of the camera. This way, they were able to film multiple passes of a shot, then rewind the film and feed it through the camera again, exposing it a second time. With this system, they would take one pass with all the lights on the set on, then they would rewind the film, turn the lights off, and insert highly reflective bounce cards where the flames were supposed to go, and then they would project those flames onto the card. This way, there was no need for any composition in the cutting room, and they were able to achieve all the effects on the same piece of film, but just layering the film with a double exposure. All these tools ended up creating a highly detailed and beautiful opening shot for this sci-fi epic. Probably the most iconic miniature in the film is Tyrell's pyramid. Constructed of styrene and rubber-molded plastic, this set was only about 3.5 feet tall, but its high level of detail aids in its towering appearance on film. The faces of the pyramid were etched brass, each little window cut out by hand and adhered to the faces. The miniature had to be so detailed because the camera would push in as close as possible to enter the first major scene of the film, the interrogation of Leon. The small window we see in the film was a separate set built to match the real one, then filmed and composited into the scene. The result is a fantastic and quite convincing transition. And Tyrell's office was another set design wonder. It is filled with hanging plants and strange artifacts. It almost has the appearance of a museum or that of a Citizen Kane Hearst tycoon figure. Yet with all the glamour, it still feels damp and oppressive, as if Tyrell enjoys the darkness of the city and built his ziggurat to reflect this. And also an interesting fact is that the actor who portrayed Tyrell, Joe Turkel, apparently he couldn't memorize lines. So in all of his scenes, they had to write out his lines on huge key cards, and his eyes can be seen in the film reading his lines. Another amazing effects shot is the huge billboard scene playing commercials. For these scenes, they wanted to portray the idea that whole buildings could be an advertisement space. So they actually filmed and produced 15 fake commercials to use in the film. Then they used a similar technique from the Hades set and projected the commercials on a screen made up of silver-painted plastic trays. These were actually pieces from a kids game that they found called Doodle Ball. It was the perfect size and shape for the set that they needed, and they bought as many as they could. And it's things like this that make the film shot like a low-budget film. All these tricks were utilized to create the captivating world of Blade Runner. With the team constantly battling lack of finances and Ridley Scott's continual pushback against the studio to make the film how he wanted, a major bomb was dropped on production. The studio decided to fire Ridley Scott and Michael Deeley, the two leaders of the entire production. But we will cover this topic next week. Join us next time as we cover part 2 of our discussion on Blade Runner. This has been Letters from the Editor. Thanks for watching.